behind the grit and gunfire of the Old West, another story was quietly unfolding, the rise of remarkable women whose beauty, charm, and resilience shaped the frontier in ways history often overlooks. These women weren't just bystanders in a man's world. They wielded power, built fortunes, and left legacies that defied expectations. Join us as we reveal the untold stories and rare photographs of the women who defined the spirit of the Wild West. Number 8. Madame Jenny Rogers. First on our list is Madame Jenny Rogers. Imagine wielding a secret so powerful it could buy you an empire. Jenny Rogers didn't have to imagine, she lived it. Born on July 4, 1843, Jenny Rogers, originally Leah J. Weaver, was far more than just a tall, elegant figure on Denver's notorious Market Street. From her humble beginnings as a farmer's daughter in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, she transformed herself into one of the most powerful and feared women in Colorado. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, Jenny was striking, with sharp features that commanded attention wherever she went. Her long, dark hair framed a face that was often described as both regal and seductive. In some photographs, Jenny, with her flawless porcelain skin and piercing eyes, is seen adorned in her signature emerald earrings and fur coat, exuding the wealth and confidence that defined her career in Denver's high society. But Jenny didn't start her career in Denver. After a turbulent marriage to Dr. G. Freeze and a stint as a maid in Pittsburgh's mayor's home, where scandal seemed to follow her like a shadow, she ran off with a steamboat captain. She then began operating high-class brothels in St. Louis and Pittsburgh. But it wasn't until 1879 that she truly made her mark when she arrived in Denver, determined to dominate the city's red light district. Her first purchase was a small house on Market Street from another legendary madam, Matty Silks. By 1880, she had already begun expanding, knocking down walls to combine properties into a much larger establishment. Jenny was known not only for her beauty and wit, but for her cunning. One of her most famous moves was orchestrating a hoax on a wealthy Denver businessman. With her lover's help, she convinced him that he was about to be arrested for the murder of his missing wife. In exchange for their silence, the businessman handed over $17,000, which Jenny used to fund the creation of her infamous House of Mirrors. Opened in 1889, the House of Mirrors was the crown jewel of Denver's underworld. With its lavish oriental rugs, grand pianos, and mirrored walls, Jenny's brothel catered to the wealthiest men in the city. One of the mirrors, an enormous 16-foot diameter fixture, hung on the ceiling, reflecting the luxurious interior and the women who entertained her elite clientele. Jenny's establishment became a staple of Denver's high society despite its illicit nature. Jenny's success, however, wasn't just about luxury. She was a shrewd businesswoman who revolutionized the way brothels were run. Unlike other madams, Jenny insisted on fresh air flowing through her establishment. She had bars installed on the windows, allowing her to air out the rooms without compromising security, a novel practice at the time. Her leadership didn't stop at her brothel. When Denver authorities passed an ordinance forcing prostitutes to wear yellow ribbons in their hair, Jenny and her fellow madams staged a protest. They paraded down 15th Street, dressed entirely in yellow hats, dresses, and parasols, defiantly reclaiming their identity. Jenny Rogers expanded her empire over the years, running the most successful brothel in Denver until her death from Bright's disease in 1909. Even after her death, the House of Mirrors continued under new ownership, solidifying Jenny's legacy as the Queen of Colorado's underworld. She was buried in Fairmount Cemetery, leaving behind a legacy that intertwined luxury, scandal, and power. While Jenny mastered the art of manipulation, the next woman won fame with nothing more than an impeccable aim. Number 7. Annie Oakley. Our next beauty dazzled millions, but her most groundbreaking feats were the ones no audience ever saw. Born as Phoebe Ann Moses on August 13, 1860 in Darke County, Ohio, Annie Oakley had a humble and difficult start to her life. Her father passed away when she was just 6 years old, leaving her family in financial ruin. At a young age, Annie developed an extraordinary talent for shooting, which quickly became her means of survival. By the time she was just a teenager, her accuracy with a rifle was helping her put food on the table and, eventually, save her family's home from foreclosure. One of the pivotal moments of Annie's life occurred when she was only 15. a traveling marksman named Frank E. Butler challenged any local in Cincinnati to a shooting contest. He expected to face a male competitor, but was shocked when the small, unassuming Annie stepped forward. Not only did Annie beat Butler in the contest, but she also won his heart. They were married the next year and became lifelong partners, both personally and professionally. From that point forward, Annie Oakley's career took off. She and Butler joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in 1885, where Annie became the show's top star. Her performances dazzled audiences across the US and Europe. Annie's sharpshooting acts included shooting cigarettes from her husband's mouth, splitting cards edge-on, and even shooting targets while looking in a mirror. One of her most famous tricks involved hitting a dime tossed in the air, a feat she would perform repeatedly to astonished crowds. Annie's skills with a rifle are evident in numerous photographs taken throughout her career. In most of these images, she is seen holding her iconic long rifle with a stern yet confident expression as she stands poised in modest clothes. One of the most fascinating episodes in Oakley's life was her friendship with Sitting Bull, the Lakota chief who led his people at the Battle of Little Bighorn. After watching one of her performances, Sitting Bull was so impressed with her marksmanship that he adopted her as his daughter, giving her the Lakota name Watanya Cecilia, meaning Little Sure Shot. Annie Oakley's fame extended far beyond the borders of the United States. In 1887, she traveled to England with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show to perform at Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. Her performances captivated the British audience, and she became a global icon. However, Annie wasn't just a performer, she was also an advocate for women's rights and self-defense. She often taught women how to use firearms and advocated for them to learn to defend themselves. In 1898, she even wrote a letter to President William McKinley, offering to train a regiment of female sharpshooters to serve in the Spanish-American War. Though her offer was declined, Oakley's advocacy for women's empowerment left a lasting mark. Despite a severe train accident in 1901 that left her partially paralyzed, Annie continued to perform after extensive recovery. Her resilience and dedication to her craft were unparalleled, and she spent the later years of her life continuing to inspire new generations of marksmen and women. Annie passed away at 66 on November 3, 1926, but her legacy lives on as one of the most iconic figures in American history. Annie's aim was unmatched, but our next beauty's fearless ambition set her apart in a world dominated by men. Number 6. Matty Silks. How far would you go for the one you love? Probably not as far as our next beauty of the Old West. Born as Martha Reddy in 1846 on a Kansas farm, Matty Silks had ambition in her blood from a young age. Unlike many women of her time, she didn't dream of marriage or settling down. She wanted to run her own business. At just 19, she was already managing a brothel in Springfield, Illinois, a remarkable feat in a profession dominated by men. Matty was determined to rise to the top, and by the late 1860s, she was making her way through various frontier towns, including Dodge City, Hays City, and Kansas City, where she became well known for her savvy business sense. By 1876, Matty had made enough money to settle in Denver, where she truly began to dominate the city's red light district. In a widely circulated image from this period, Matty stands confidently with an umbrella in hand, her elaborate dress and sharp gaze reflecting the success and power she commanded. Matty's success wasn't just about wealth, it was about power. She built a reputation for treating her employees fairly and creating a safe, well-regulated environment. Her business thrived, attracting wealthy businessmen and politicians alike. Perhaps what made Matty stand out most was her fierce independence and daring spirit. In 1877, she famously challenged her rival, Katie Fulton, to a duel, an event that became one of the most talked-about scandals in Denver. The two women were reportedly in love with the same man, Cortez Thompson, who was also Matty's longtime lover. At a champagne party to celebrate a race Thompson had won, which made Matty $1,000 richer, the two women had a heated argument and had to settle the dispute with pistols. Both women fired but missed their intended targets. Instead, Thompson was accidentally shot, though he survived. Matty's life wasn't without its challenges. Thompson never divorced his wife, and when he died in 1900, Matty spent lavishly on his funeral, despite their rocky relationship. Matty continued to thrive in business, even adopting a child whose mother had worked in her brothel. Though she never had children of her own, Matty treated her employees and the women in her care like family. In 1911, 2 years after the death of her rival Jenny Rogers, Matty purchased the House of Mirrors for $14,000. Under Matty's management, the House of Mirrors continued to flourish, becoming a symbol of the opulence and vice of Denver's Market Street during its heyday. Matty married John Reddy in 1923 after she retired from the business, living a quiet life in Denver. She passed away in 1929 after complications from a fall at the age of 83. Despite making a fortune over her lifetime, estimated to be well over $1 million, Matty died with only $4,000 in assets, a reminder of the hard-living world she lived in. She was buried under her birth name, Martha Reddy, next to Thompson's unmarked grave in Denver's Fairmount Cemetery. Matty dominated Denver's streets, but the next woman on our list mastered a different game. Number 5. Madame Mustache. Our next beauty could hold a room full of hardened gamblers in the palm of her hand, but her final bet would be her most tragic. Born around 1829, Eleanor Dumont, also known as Simone Jules, was an enigmatic figure who made her mark as one of the first known female blackjack dealers on the American frontier. Many accounts say she was French, though some claim she hailed from New Orleans. Either way, by 1854, she arrived in Nevada City, California, during the height of the gold rush, where she quickly gained notoriety for her sophisticated gambling parlor, 21. Her parlor was named after her favorite card game, a precursor to blackjack. At a time when gambling halls were male-dominated, Eleanor's casino was something entirely new. Her establishment catered to well-dressed men only, with strict rules prohibiting swearing, smoking, and fighting. The elegant Dumont, dressed in fine gowns and with flawless manners, dealt cards and flirted just enough to keep the men engaged without compromising her dignity. This combination of class and intrigue drew crowds, and soon Eleanor became famous across California. However, as the gold in Nevada City ran dry, Eleanor sold her parlor and traveled from one mining town to another, chasing new fortunes. She built a solid reputation as a fair and skilled dealer, and while she was admired for her beauty, it was her formidable card skills that kept her at the table. It was during this time that she developed the slight line of hair on her upper lip, which led to the nickname Madame Mustache, a moniker that followed her for the rest of her life. One of the most well-known images of Eleanor Dumont clearly shows this feature, giving her a distinctive look that contrasted with her otherwise refined and elegant appearance. In 1872, after years of success, Eleanor tried to retire from gambling. She purchased a ranch in Carson City, Nevada, hoping for a quieter life. However, her dreams were shattered when she was deceived by a conman named Jack McKnight, who ran off with her money and sold her property. In a twist worthy of the Wild West, Dumont tracked McKnight down and killed him, but she was never charged with the crime. Returning to gambling, Eleanor's once elegant demeanor began to fade. She drank heavily as she continued to travel from town to town, trying to reclaim her lost success. By 1879, she found herself in Bodie, California, where her luck finally ran out. After losing her last $300 in a single night, Eleanor quietly left the gambling hall, walked into the desert, and took her own life by drinking a bottle of wine laced with morphine. Eleanor Dumont's death was mourned by many who had known her, and her funeral was one of the largest Bodie had ever seen. While her exact gravesite has been lost to time, her legacy as a woman who broke through the barriers of the frontier remains. As one miner put it, her life was as square a game as was ever dealt, a fitting tribute to a woman who dared to play and win in a man's world. While Madame Mustache played her hand at cards, our next figure survived something much more dangerous. Number 4. Squirrel Tooth Alice. Beneath her unusual nickname, the next beauty on our list held a secret that made her one of the most unforgettable women of the Old West. Born on October 15, 1855, in Belton, Texas, Mary Elizabeth Haley, later famously known as Squirrel Tooth Alice, lived a life marked by both tragedy and triumph. In 1864, Mary's life took a dramatic turn when she was kidnapped by Comanche warriors during a raid. She spent 3 years in captivity before her family was able to ransom her back. Upon her return, society viewed her with suspicion, assuming that she had been violated during her captivity. This stigma followed her throughout her life, forcing her to forge her own path away from her family. Determined to escape her past, Mary ran away to Kansas, where she reinvented herself. It was there that she met Billy Thompson, a gambler and younger brother of the infamous gunfighter Ben Thompson. Together, Mary and Billy roamed the cow towns of Kansas, with Mary taking on the alias Alice, as she worked as a dance hall girl and prostitute. Despite the rough circumstances, Alice quickly became one of the most popular women in Dodge City. It was during this time that she earned her iconic nickname. A drunk in a saloon mistook one of her pet prairie dogs for a squirrel, and with her prominent gap-toothed smile, the name Squirrel Tooth Alice was born, and it stuck. In a photograph from her later years, Alice can be seen wearing a simple dress, her distinctive smile hinting at the years of adventure and hardship that had shaped her life. Her striking features and confidence made her a familiar face in Dodge City's red light district, where she eventually ran her own brothel. Alice and Billy's tumultuous relationship lasted for over 2 decades, during which she bore him several children. They lived together as husband and wife, though it was often a struggle due to Billy's gambling problems and frequent brushes with the law. Despite these challenges, Alice continued to work in the world's oldest profession well into her 60s. Remaining unashamed of her career, she passed her trade down to her daughters, many of whom followed in her footsteps. Her later years were spent in Sweetwater, Texas, where she owned and operated a brothel, becoming one of the most successful madams of her time. She continued to work until her retirement at the age of 66. Squirrel Tooth Alice passed away on April 13, 1953, at the age of 97 in Los Angeles, California. In her long life, Alice saw the rise and fall of the Old West, and through it all, she remained resilient, living unapologetically on her own terms. While Alice escaped a harsh reality to build her fortune, the next woman made hers by outsmarting men in a deadly game. Number 3. Lottie Dano. The next beauty on our list was a legend in the male-dominated gambling halls of the Old West. But what she left behind after her final card game is the real surprise. Born on April 21, 1844, in Warsaw, Kentucky, Carlotta J. Tompkins, known later as Lottie Dano, was destined for an unconventional life. Raised in a wealthy family, her father, a racehorse breeder and passionate gambler, taught her card games from a young age. Little did anyone know that these early lessons would prepare her for a career that would make her one of the most famous female gamblers in Texas during the 19th century. Following the death of her father during the Civil War, Lottie's family fortune dwindled. Seeking stability, her mother sent her to Detroit to find a wealthy husband, accompanied by her tall, formidable nanny, Mary Poindexter. However, the young Carlotta quickly ran out of money and turned to gambling to survive, embarking on a journey that would take her through riverboat casinos and eventually the saloons of Texas. By 1865, she arrived in San Antonio, where her natural talent for poker caught the attention of the local gambling community. Her beauty and grace earned her the nickname Angel of San Antonio, but it was her skills at the poker table that truly made her stand out. During this time, she met Frank Thurmond, a fellow gambler who would become her lifelong partner. Their relationship, however, was far from straightforward. After Frank was accused of murder, the two fled the city, living as traveling gamblers in various frontier towns. Lottie's most famous years were spent in Fort Griffin, Texas, a rough-and-tumble frontier town where cowboys and traders flush with cash were easy marks for her gambling skills. It was here that she adopted the name Lottie Dano, a playful nod to dinero, reflecting her success at the poker tables. Known as the Queen of the Pasteboards, she made a name for herself gambling alongside famous figures like Doc Holliday. In one of the few surviving photos of Lottie, she's seen with a confident yet elegant demeanor, dressed in the fine clothing that was a hallmark of her success. Her dark eyes and flaming red hair, as described by those who knew her, only added to her captivating presence. By 1877, Lottie and Frank settled in Kingston, New Mexico, where they opened a gambling room. 2 years later, they moved to Silver City, where they finally married in 1880. Though they continued gambling for a few more years, the couple eventually gave up their nomadic lifestyle and settled in Deming, New Mexico. Frank became vice president of a bank, and Lottie, perhaps seeking redemption for her earlier life, helped found St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Lottie Deno's story ends not in scandal or poverty, but in quiet respectability, an unusual outcome for a woman of the Old West. She passed away on February 9, 1934, at the age of 89, leaving behind a legacy as one of the West's most famous female gamblers, and the inspiration for the character Miss Kitty in the TV show Gunsmoke. While Lottie's life was full of high-stakes poker games, the next beauty turned her fortune into one of the most luxurious establishments in the Wild West. Number 2. Madame Pearl de Vere. Pearl de Vere's final party was set to be the grandest celebration in Cripple Creek, but no one could have predicted how it would end. Pearl de Vere, born as Eliza Martin in October 1859, became one of the most famous and successful madams in Cripple Creek, Colorado, during the late 19th century. Pearl's early life remains somewhat mysterious, but by the age of 14 or 15, she had already entered the world of prostitution in Denver, where her beauty and business acumen helped her rise quickly in a male-dominated world. But it wasn't until the economic downturn of the Silver Panic in 1893 that she made the fateful decision to move to Cripple Creek, a booming gold town in Colorado. By 1896, Pearl opened the Old Homestead House, a high-class brothel that catered exclusively to the wealthy elite. The two-story brick building was furnished with luxurious velvet drapes, crystal chandeliers, and even modern amenities like electric lights and a telephone, features rare in a small mining town. Pearl ensured that only the finest clientele were admitted to her establishment, requiring references and a hefty entrance fee before any services were even considered. Her clients paid up to $250 per night, a fortune at the time equating to about $6,500 today. Pearl was not just a shrewd businesswoman, but also known for the way she treated her employees. She provided regular medical checkups for the women working under her and created a luxurious and safe environment in a profession that was often dangerous. This attention to detail set the Old Homestead apart, and Pearl became known for throwing extravagant parties where only the best French champagne and fine cuisine were served. In one description of the Old Homestead, guests could sit on a second-story balcony and admire the women in the parlor below before making their final selection. One of the most striking images of Pearl shows her draped in a stunning ball gown, reportedly worth $800 a fortune at the time. This photograph captures her essence as a woman of elegance and mystery, whose beauty was matched only by her sharp mind. Pearl's love for fine fashion and luxury was well known, and she often dressed in the finest attire imported directly from Paris. On June 4, 1897, during what was supposed to be a celebration of another successful mining strike, Pearl retired early from her own party, feeling unwell. She reportedly took morphine to help her sleep, but tragically, she never woke up. She was found dead the next morning at the age of 35. Some say it was an accidental overdose, while others whisper of suicide, but the truth remains a mystery. Pearl's funeral was an event like no other. Thousands of people lined the streets to pay their respects as her body, dressed in a pink Parisian gown, was carried to Mount Pisgah Cemetery. An anonymous $1,000 check ensured she was buried in style, making her funeral one of the most talked-about events in Cripple Creek's history. While Pearl's luxurious life came to an abrupt end, the next woman's rise from poverty to power made her a figure of national fascination. Number 1. Belle Breezing. A madam in the headlines? Only Belle Breezing could turn the tables of infamy to become a national sensation. Belle Breezing was born on June 16, 1860, in Lexington, Kentucky, as Mary Belle Cox. Her early years were steeped in hardship, being the illegitimate daughter of a local prostitute. After a turbulent childhood marked by poverty, Belle's mother passed away when she was just 15. Left to fend for herself, Belle quickly followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a prostitute at a notorious local brothel. In 1879, Belle began working for the highly respected Madame Jenny Hill, a key figure in the Lexington prostitution scene. Belle's sharp intelligence and beauty helped her rise quickly in the ranks. By the time she was 23, Belle had established her own brothel on Megowan Street in Lexington, a venue that would become her base of operations for years to come. Belle's success didn't come just from providing typical services, Her establishments were known for their strict order and refinement, making them stand out in a profession that often courted chaos. Her brothel was famously called the most orderly of disorderly houses. This discipline was one reason why Belle thrived for decades, while others fell by the wayside. One of the most popular photos of Belle shows her with a dignified, almost aristocratic look. Her expression calm, her high-collared dress adorned with intricate embroidery, and a hat perched elegantly on her head. This picture encapsulates the duality of Belle's life. A madam, yes, but one with a grace and refinement that set her apart. Throughout her career, Belle built a network of high-profile clientele. She rubbed shoulders with the wealthy elite, earning both their patronage and their protection. Despite her line of work, she became a respected figure in Lexington, even gaining national recognition. Many believe that Margaret Mitchell based the character Belle Watling from Gone with the Wind on Belle Breezing, though Mitchell denied this. In 1917, Belle closed her brothel, but she continued to live in her mansion for another 2 decades. Sadly, her later years were marked by declining health. She became addicted to morphine, which she used to manage pain from uterine cancer, a condition that plagued her until her death on August 11, 1940, at the age of 80. Her death was noted as a milestone of the week by Time magazine, a remarkable testament to her national influence and legacy. Even after her death, Belle Breezing's influence lingers as one of her former houses still stands today, part of Transylvania University. Thanks for watching.